G'day folks, in this week's clip I'll be looking at how I turned a chop and flip aquaponics system into a 3-bed split flow. Stick around if you want to find out more. So it has taken a while, but we're finally here, folks. I built Mum's original chop and flip aquaponics system a number of years ago now, and we never actually ended up putting fish in there. Things got put on the back burner, but anyway, we have a 3-bed system now, and we will be ordering some fish once we do a few more tweaks on the system, which I'll run through in a minute. So I'll stop gibbering on, flip the camera around, and I'll give you a run through on how the system's laid out. So to begin with, this was roughly where Mum and Dad's chop and flip system was. This is almost the same system, but a few things are new that I'll run through in a minute. Now, to begin with, Mum and Dad were running it as a bit of a bioponic style system. Fish food was being used to cycle it to begin with, but no fish ended up going in there. So I think Dad put a couple of brews in there, and also Mum was using fish emulsion as well, just to feed the plants that were in there. And you know, they got a number of different crops, leafy greens and herbs and all sorts of things out of there. And in the end, had a couple of amazing looking rosemary bushes in there. But anyway, that all had to be cleaned out to create this new system. So to begin with, we mucked out the bed. I was expecting there to be a load of solids down the bottom, and I wasn't wrong. I was also expecting to find anaerobic zones underneath the parsley and the rosemary and the rhubarb roots, but I found nothing at all. There was no really bad smell coming out of any of the media that came out. In fact, it smelled a lot like compost. So we were really chuffed about that. It means there was no denitrification happening there. So once that bed was cleaned out, we got to replace the rusted cage that was the base for the grow bed and also surround the fish tank. And what I've ended up doing is putting in a slightly larger one. Thank you, Anita and John. There's a bit of a gap under there, as you can see, so we have a lot better access to the hose work and pipe work that comes down below. The other thing we did was we popped in a different IBC base down the bottom. There was a little bit of rust in the old one, and also sat it up off the ground on some hardwood sleepers. So we shouldn't have any hassles with moisture rusting out the base now. And the cladding will be going on once we sort out what we're doing with the rest of the beds. Just quickly, this is sarking, an insulation wrap. I used it on my system in the past. Our beds have still got it on there. It's just to block the UV light from getting through there, causing an algae outbreak on the sides of the beds. The other thing you may notice is this bed, the sides are a lot shorter now, just to make it a little bit easier to access for Mum, because the whole thing is a lot higher off the ground than it was before. So the beds come up to my hip here, so they're probably about $1.10 m off the ground, just over 3.5 foot-ish. So Mum might have a few issues reaching into the centre, same with Dad. They're not as tall as me, but it'd be nothing for Dad to organise some sort of a little step there for him. So the shorties can reach in the centre. I'll probably get a whack for that. Yeah, so that's the original setup, and what we've basically done is expand on that by adding a fish tank over there, a radial flow settler, and also 2 additional grow beds. These grow beds here are pretty much all set up as a constant flood at the moment, so they just have little standpipes in there. And one of the reasons for that is I'm trying to get all the media to soak in the water, because you will find that media does tend to float, and it's probably one of the most common questions I get is, why is my media floating, Rob? It's been in there for a week now. Sometimes, depending on the brand, it can just take a fair while for the water to soak into all the pores on the clay and weigh it down. You might be able to see there's a little bit of crud on my hands as I dig through the clay. There's a few roots and bits and pieces. That's because I bought this media second-hand from a chap who was selling it on a Facebook group. He was a landscaper, and it was just on a site that they wanted cleaned out. It's been sitting in bags here at Mum and Dad's for a couple of years waiting to go in. So it did need to be cleaned before it was popped in, and cleaning clay is really easy, and I recommend you do it, and you'll see why in a tick. All I do is fill up a wheelbarrow with some water, pop in some shade cloth, empty in the clay, give it a good swish around, try and dislodge all the bits of dust and the small bits of clay down to the base of the wheelbarrow, give it a bit of a drain and turf it into the grow bed itself. And just to give you an idea, it took 6 or 7 bags worth of clay to fill up this bed here, around about 6.5. It's roughly 300-ish litres in volume. And to give you some idea of the amount of particulate, the dust that is on these balls, this is the amount of sludge that was left after cleaning those six to 7 bags worth of clay. So moving on from the grow beds, what I might do is I might trace how the water flows through the system and show you how it's all set up, just to show you the other components. Just down in here in the sump, we have a rather large 8,000 litre an hour pump down there. That is flowing through a 32mm or 1.25" reinforced flexible hose. It's being teed off at this point, off to a valve just to turn off the grow beds, and then out to the grow beds. Everywhere where the water is coming from the pump, so it's under pressure, I have put on these stainless steel hose clamps just to stop any pipes from failing and blowing off. So to trace it to the fish tank, it comes up here, and then under this, through this line, that runs out to the fish tank itself. Up the top here, I've popped a bulkhead fitting in. I could have used a uni seal, but I have a feeling this is going to be moved around a bit. And I just like the stability of a bulkhead fitting in somewhere where something's going to be moved a lot. In here, we have a 1-inch PVC valve with a little bit of an angle on it just to push the water off to one side. And that is feeding into the fish tank. There's a little bit discoloured, partly due to the solids coming through from the media, and also too, you might be able to see down on the base there were some solids that came out with the original water when we emptied out the old system, which I saved. And down the base there, you might be able to make out the solids lifting outlet that runs out down through the sidewall there into the radial flow settler, which I'll get into in a minute. Now, a lot of these parts have been salvaged actually. This is the old fish tank and lid from the old aquaculture system we had. We had a 2-tank aquaculture system, and that hammerhead filter or skimmer over there is actually one of the fittings from the biofilter from the old aquaculture tank. So I'm pretty much just trying to reuse everything that I can from bits and pieces that I've stored at home. So that's why a lot of the pipe sizes are a little bit over the top as well, which I'll show you in a minute. Now, yeah, back to the water flow into the fish tank here. The skimmer takes most of the clean water out through the top down into the sump tank, which we'll look at in a minute. That solids lifting overflow down the bottom there, which is a bit hard for you to see, takes all the solids that collect on the bottom out through this line here, and then up through a little radial flow settler, and there is the standpipe there. There's not a lot coming through at this point in time, but when we first connected the system, we were getting a lot of solids come through that were just accumulated from when we pumped the sump tank into there while we were working on the system. It's basically just a 1-inch or 25mm standpipe. Down the bottom here, we have a barrel union, so this system can be disconnected and worked on. While editing, I just realised that I never went back and put the barrel union on the other side of the valve into the radial flow settler. So that's one job I'm going to have to tackle before we put fish in the system. We also have a valve there, so we can turn that valve off when it comes time to clean this radial flow settler. Down the base here, we have a valve for taking the solids out. I'll just show you how that's set up in here. Just use my hairy mug to shade it, but you can see down there the drain fitting. So what that is a little bit of a 90 degrees that goes down to a flange, a DIY flange on the base. That picks up the solids and brings them out here. Mum and Dad can either pop a hose on there or put a bucket underneath it. I just need to make up another adapter there. And they can use that nutrient-rich water on their veggie beds, on their wicking beds, or out on their ornamental patch out the front, so none of the nutrients are going to waste. When it does come time to empty the waste, what they have to do is just turn this valve here on, and what that will do is drain all the water from this level here all the way down to there, out into the sump tank, because it will be relatively solids free. And then this volume here is what will go out to the different veggie patch and ornamental gardens out the front. So just a bit of a heads up on why I'm using this dual drain system. We've basically got a smaller volume of water coming through here into a smaller vessel, which means we have a larger retention time. Now, if I was to run the full flow from the fish tank, imagining I don't have that bottom drain, through a vessel of this size here, the retention time would be negligible. A bulk of the solids will just go straight through into the sump tank to be sent around the system, both the fish tank and the grow bed side of things. Because I have a restricted flow, a slower flow rate coming through into this barrel here, it will give a much larger retention time for any solids that are suspended in the water column to precipitate out and collect on the base. Now I haven't worked out the exact flow rates for all this bit of plumbing because I virtually turned this system on about an hour ago, but I will come back in a later clip and run through all that, just the flow rates for that there. Now the pipe work here, the reason I went with this 50mm pipe, as I mentioned before with the fish tank and other bits and pieces, it's left over from the old aquaculture system. So rather than go out and buy all new pipe and all new fittings, I figured I might as well reuse what I can, hence why there's joiners in it and that sort of thing. So I could have gotten away with, this is 50mm or 2-inch, I could have gotten away with, I think, possibly 1.25 inches. I think I would have been pushing it, so maybe 1.5 inches or a 40mm would have been better. But yeah, like I said, this was what I had on hand, so that's why I'm using it, trying to keep the cost down as low as I can. And just to follow the flow down, it comes down into a little bit of a dual filter system. It's a shade cloth in there, the water's running through it, collecting the fine solids. Not only that, the surface area on the shade cloth is providing a home for the nitrophine bacteria to colonize, so they can process any waste, ammonia waste that comes from the fish, makes it through down into the sump tank, so you don't have ammonia rich water going back through the pump back into the fish tank again. And just looking at that other pipe, that's another piece from the fish farm, filter screen I made up. That's the pipe work coming down around the other side from the fish tank skimmer itself. So just depositing the bulk of the water or bulk of the flow from the fish tank comes through there, down through the filter, with only a fraction coming out through the radial flow filter itself. So now we'll pop around and I'll show you how the grow beds are plumbed up. It's pretty basic. I've used the 25mm reinforced hose here. I know, I've mentioned in a clip that PVC smooth bore is a lot better, but because I've got such an oversized pump for this system, I'm not too concerned about losing too much flow rate. So what we have again is nut and tails, so I can remove bits and pieces from the system and clean them out, blow out any solids that accumulate in there, and hose clamps on all sections where the water is running under pressure from the pump. Quite obviously I've got a Y splitting there, so we have one branch going off to the far bed, and we have this branch here with a T coming out to feed this bed here. And as you can see on the other side of the valve, I don't have any hose clamps. I don't think they're really needed because it's rather hard to get this pipe work over those barb fittings, and I haven't had any leak on me yet. And then under the bed, I've just got the hose zip tied under the base there for the time being. These stands, by the way, are made from reclaimed fencing, school fencing. And then it just runs up the side here again, clamps to the base of the valve, and then just zip tied up the top here, running into the grow beds themselves. So while she does look a little bit scruffy at the moment, I did mention previously, we're using the battens from our house before it was renovated to make up some timber framing to go around. It'll cover up the sarking and it'll cover up the fish tank as well. And then Mum and Dad will have a real schmicko looking system. We've also got to add in things like the air for the system. I'm thinking about running a Venturi, but we're also going to have air stones in there as well. So all those things need to be added on as well. But yeah, I thought I'd just give you a bit of a basic look at how we turned a chop and flip into a larger system. So it's just started to rain. Sorry folks, I've got to wrap it up here. I haven't covered everything with this clip here. I will be doing more about, cycling the system and planning it out and those sorts of things. So there will be clips coming in the future. Also too, for you folks out there who are interested, the new Farm Your Own Yard supporters page is up. If you find the clips helpful and you want to give us a couple of bob here or there just to help support the channel and the clips I've got coming on down the line, I'd really appreciate that. If not, thank you very much anyway. Feel free to share the clips around, let your family and friends know who are into aquaponics that a new one's been posted, and I'd really appreciate that. And once again, thank you to all the supporters out there, no matter what platform you're on. And as always, you can check out our super contributors down in the description below. It'd be fantastic if you could jump on over to their websites and Facebook pages and see what they're all about. But I will pretty much leave it there. Hope you're all well and happy and your systems are booming, and I'll catch you next clip. Cheers folks, have a top one. And yes, that is a Kent pumpkin that's grown out of Mum and Dad's compost, along with I think a Cape gooseberry and a load of tomatoes. I don't think Mum's camellia is going to enjoy having that many pot mates, but we'll wait and see.